So can I share the screen now? Okay, I'll do so. So shall I start?
Yes, maybe I just do a quick introduction to the rest.
Okay.
Today we're very honored to have Professor Huang and Miss Jasmine No from the building department of building, if I'm not wrong. Professor Huang has been working on this from our seed grant call last year. And basically he's looking at the technological risk perception and people's perceptions towards technology in the built environment. So without further ado, I'll just hand the time over to Prof. Huang. So take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, as you can see here, title of the research project is TLP and TC in the built environment. I just wanted to talk about this technological risk perception as well as a technological competency within the context of the built environment. As you may know, the built environment is a relatively new term, and it used to be construction industry, right? But these days we want to upgrade the term to the broader level and something like that. So we have been using this built environment since, let's say, the 4 to 5 years ago already, right? I introduced Jasmine to some of you, but those who just joined, Jasmine is the researcher in my research team, and Jasmine is a PhD candidate working on like a technological competency in project management or for project managers in the built environment. So that's why I can say she is a key personnel for this research project. Okay. As you may know, this project kicked off April last year when COVID-19 was at the peak point. So it was not that easy to make kind of the progress, but today is one of the main purposes is to let you know the progress that have been made so far. Then I'm going to share the research content with you. All right, so in sense of the research motivation, as you may hear, there's a term like a disruptive technology, right? And so when we say disruptive technology, we can say new technology, advanced technology, such as cyber physical system, of which the essence is from digital twin, right? And digital twin is also based on the digitalization of all kind of data, all kind of information, and so on and so forth. And also big data approach, or autonomous vehicles, and this kind of new technology, also AR, VR, right, can be implemented into the built environment, especially to manage our various kind of the projects, right? But the main issue, and this industry has been quite notorious in sense of the speed of adopting the new technology. They are kind of a laggard, or they are at the nascent stage, very slow to adopt this kind of new technology, right? Because when they consider the adoption of new technology, they also see the high level of the risk of that specific technology or adoption of that technology, because adoption of new technology will change their work processes, right? Organization system, or even the culture within the organization, and so on and so forth. So we cannot ignore their risk perception with regard to the adoption of new technology, right? And secondly, whenever they think about, and we think about new technology, we need to have the key personnel who can successfully, actively adopt the technology into our projects, right? But many of them think they're not the right person to implement or adopt those technology for their organizations or for their projects. Okay, so that's why we want to really, our research team, my research team, really want to study about technological risk perception and technological risk perception gap, because actually there should be the certain level of the risk, actual risk, versus perceived risk perceived by like expert versus the project managers, right? Laymen, right? So there must be the gap. So if we can reduce this gap, actually, then it can improve the adoption of the technology in order to reap the benefits from the adoption itself. Okay, and this kind of TLP gap or TLP itself really affect the technological competency. Okay, if one project manager has too much high level of the risk perception, in other words, this guy can be called risk avoider, right? This guy tries to avoid all types of risk, because even if this guy is very competent in sense of the technology adoption, he doesn't want to carry any kind of the risk, right? Then probably this project or this organization hiring this project manager may lose a lot of opportunities to reap the benefit from the technology adoption. Okay, this is very important because Singapore government tried to push all the industry to go toward the digitalization, which means we must, it's not a choice, but a must, right? Adopt a different kind of knowledge. That means we should be able to review the different types of technology which can bring the benefit to our processes, which can improve our performances across the whole different industry, right? But there have not been much research, or there have not been many studies talking about the underlying factors that really affect this technological risk perception, or our GLP gap, or the TC. Okay, Olivia, you have a question? You are muted now.
Sure, thanks a lot, Wang. It's starting to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify, when you're talking about these characteristics of the construction industry as being so risk averse with regard to new technologies, are you talking about Singapore specifically, or is this just a sort of international phenomenon?
Based on our research review, Singapore is quite slow than, for example, like a US construction industry. But across the world, whenever something new technology comes out, if we compare ourselves, like construction industry, against the manufacturing industry, we are quite late, and tend to be kind of scared about the adoption of the new technology. Okay. Yeah. Then because the term technological risk perception and technological competency relatively new, so there have not been any kind of systematic process or tools that can assess the level of technological risk perception or level of the technological competency, especially for the built environment, or especially for the project managers or stakeholders. That's why our research tried to talk about this technological risk perception in the context of the built environment, and eventually we want to reduce the gap, TLP gap, between the expert and the layman. When I say the layman, in our context, project managers who do not have much experience in adopting the new technology can be considered the layman as well. And when we say the expert, they are the ones who really develop the technology itself. For example, BIM or AR, VR, so they know the source or essence of the technology itself, and even they can advise us to advise on how we can effectively implement. So when we say project managers as a layman, they don't really know how to systematically implement, adopt this new technology to successfully manage and deliver their own project, especially the construction projects, right? Built environment projects. So we have two research questions here. How does a person's technological competency relate with technological risk perception, or vice versa, right? Then how can the technological risk perception gap be reduced? So I think you know about the risk communication strategies, right? So eventually we try to develop risk communication strategy to reduce the gap. But before that, we would like to know the mechanism or relationship between TLP and TC. So this is a conceptual kind of the figure showing the four quadrants, right? So if we can accurately assess the level of the technological risk perception as well as the technological competency, we can plot their levels for these two key areas into the four quadrants. So x-axis is about technological risk perception, and y-axis represents the technological competency. But we don't really know which area is the best, right? High level of the risk perception, technological risk perception, and high level of the technological competency. If one project manager belongs to this quadrant, when I say this, so this quadrant, I don't know what this means actually. And let's say Nathaniel belongs to this quadrant. What does it mean? So that's why we really want to study what will be the relations between these two key areas that can really improve the performance of the project and performance of the organization as well, right? So once we identify and define the relationship, actually, I think we can reduce the gap there. Okay. All right, these are more specific research objectives to answer those research questions. There are 7 specific research objectives. Of course, it would be great if we can finish all of the 7 objectives within 1 year and with the fund provided by IPUR. But only 1 and 2 can be completed. And 3 and 4 can be partially completed based on these IPUR projects. Okay, let me just delete this annotation. Okay, so as the scope of these IPUR projects, we focus more on like identifying the key factors that really affect technological risk perception and technological competency. So I'm going to show you how many factors we have identified. Not just identified, we kind of list up all kind of the factors, then try to narrow these factors down to the manageable sets of the factors, going through the validation procedure with the expert, going through the analysis and something like that. Because there have not been many studies talking especially about technological risk and technological competency. There are so many studies talking about risk perception factors or risk factors, right? Or competency factors, something like that. But we need to narrow this down to the technological aspect, as well as in the context of construction industry and built environment industry. Okay, and 3 and 4, I'm going to show you some screenshots later, but we try to, we have been developing this kind of a system that can assess the level of technical risk perception and technological competency of project managers. We haven't developed all, but once we develop, fully develop this system, let's say Nathaniel access to this website and you go through all the questions there, then eventually you can get to know your risk perception level as well as a competency level. Then it will compare your perceived technological risk versus the actual level of the technological risk, right? Then provide how you can reduce this gap with the consideration of your level of the competency. Okay, that is what we eventually develop in sense of this system itself, but it would take much longer time. So in order to complete, let's say, number 3 and number 7, of course, we need to get the full support for the full proposal. So actually, I have submitted the full proposal white paper as white paper for tier 2 last month. And if the university approves, and probably I can submit it to the tier 2, probably end of this year, something like that. And hopefully can get the full funding to complete all of these objectives. Okay. Yeah, let me quickly go through because there are so many slides. But yeah, from now on, I'm not going to go through all the details, but I can briefly talk about the categories on the risk perception factor, technological risk perception factors, as well as the technological competency factors. So we carry out comprehensive literature review, then probably we identify at least 100, 200 of factors, but we try to reduce the number down to 37 factors with the validation of the expert as well. So what I'm telling you now on this screen is these are the key factors that really affect the sense of kind of technological risk or perception of technological risk of the project managers. Okay, so not very special. Probably you can easily imagine and why these are the factors that really affect the technological risk perception. Okay, then in sense of technological competency, actually, as I introduced, Jasmine has been doing her research on this technological competency, and there are much more factors and with the subcategories, much more subcategories. There are 3 major key areas that really affect the technological competency, like a knowledge, right, in the different areas, and skill sets or skills, and personal attributes are really the key factors affecting individuals' technological competency. Okay, so there are different and various kind of theories integrated to identify these factors. And later, I'm going to show you the integrated model talking about both TRP and TC and their relationship as well. And by the way, Jasmine, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. Okay, yeah. Knowledge area, on your left side, there are 10 factors. These are the traditional project management kind of principles. So in order to be competent, right, in sense of technological competency, right, the project manager should be able to say, I'm very competent in these areas as well. And when we adopt the technology, especially disruptive technology, project managers should be very competent in these areas of knowledge, especially for that specific disruptive technology. Okay, you may not know how these factors have been asked for project managers. So we came up with a kind of survey questions. So in the survey question area, the respondents, who are the project managers, pick one specific scale between 1 and 7. Right? So they try to express or rate themselves, right, in a scale of 1 to 7 in all of these areas. Okay. Then there should be the algorithm, including some weights that can come up with the index or summarize the score for each area. Then when we consolidate those kind of summarize the score or the index, then eventually the project manager who fill up the survey questionnaire can get to know the level of the competency. Actually, that is the kind of research approach to identify the certain level of competency as well as the risk perception level. Okay. Yeah. So skill sets, these are the key skill sets required for the project managers. So for both knowledge areas and skill set, we didn't have any issue and problem to identify these factors actually. But if you see the personal attributes, Jasmine probably identify more than 1,000 because there are so many things to consider when we talk about characteristics or personal attributes, right? And Jasmine integrated the different kind of theories, right? Then based on those kind of integration, then we can eventually develop the model, consolidated model that can explain the relationship between TC and TRP. Okay? So you can take more time later, not during the presentation now, about the individual factors. Okay? So technology effect or technology anxiety or innovativeness and so on and so forth. So there are kind of the theories talking about impact of this competency as well. But the impact have not been measured going through this project. And this will be the scope of this project itself. But if we can measure and assess the individual factors impact, right, on final project outcome and performance, that will be fabulous as well. Okay. So this is the proposed model that can describe the relationship between TRP and TC. Right? So we try to identify each of the subcategories and the factors belonging to each subcategory. Right? Then kind of hypothesis and assumption is like all of these factors eventually influence the level of the TC as well as the TRP. Okay. With this kind of a roadmap, we try to collect the data. But as I said, each factor has been converted to kind of the questions, each question in the survey. Then we have collected the inputs from about 50 project managers so far. Then later, I'm going to show you a kind of outcome from the descriptive analysis, because the statistical analysis have not started yet. And the research approach-wise, there are about 12 major tasks. And so far, we completed, as I said, identification of the key factors for these two key variables. Okay, then we completed a certain kind of task to develop the entire system. And as explained, we carry out pilot interviews to fine-tune the factors we identified. And we converted those factors to the certificationnaire to be able to kind of assess the level of TRP, the level of the TC. Then, as I highlighted, we just did this for the project managers, but project managers hired by like developers, contractors, government agencies, but their job titles, and they consider themselves project managers, not like a structural engineer or architectural engineer. So we didn't really include the engineers. But this kind of concept and research approach can be applied to the other types of the jobs or other types of the stakeholders in the built environment or in other industry as well. So more contribution will be like application to the other industry and other job types following the framework we have been developing and we have been establishing so far. Okay, so we are going to conduct, we plan to conduct this kind of statistical method because based on the preliminary analysis, we got to know that the data collected are not normally distributed. So we are going to adopt the non-parametric analysis method to see the difference between the different groups. And I will explain some of the examples later. And these are the kind of profile of the respondents. And as I say, they are all project managers. with the different years of the experience. And one thing we can focus on, or one thing that is interesting is how many of the respondents have experienced in the adoption of new technology or disruptive technology I mentioned. About 73% out of these 48 project managers. And I have in-depth discussion with Jasmine and my research team about this group, no, and about 30%. We really need to exclude this guys' input. So the conclusion is no, because we keep this, but if we can compare their TRP level or TC level, right, with the one who have experience in adoption of new technology, that will be interesting result as well, right? So that's why I can just provide a descriptive kind of illustration of the data set today. But if we conduct more of the statistical analysis, then we may be able to, or we should find more meaningful results, okay? And at the organization level, then at the project level. So number of the project respondent carry out is like a 388. So those 48 project managers said that they involve about 390 projects, okay? So out of 390 projects, only 35% adopted at least one specific type of disruptive technology. Okay? At the organization level, all the organization actually carry out about 1,300 projects. Out of this project, only 243 projects adopted at least one disruptive technology. So you can intuitively know the adoption rate is quite low, right? When we compare this to the manufacturing industry, which we didn't really do, right? But what I can tell you going through the literature review, this percentage is far lower than manufacturing industry, okay? Jasmine and I had some kind of argument what we need to show for this kind of analysis. But in order to show you how we are going to perform the statistical analysis, we decided to include some of the descriptive analysis. At the beginning in the survey, we asked them to rate themselves in sense of the technological competency level or risk attitude. So this is a kind of very direct input from the respondent, right? So let's say, again, Nathaniel, you tick number 3 here. But later, there is sets of the question that can assess Nathaniel's technological competency level eventually. So once we kind of do the programming and create an algorithm and get the index, consolidated index, we can compare this direct input versus the score from the system or assessment tool. Then that will be the validation kind of process. And hopefully we can have a minimal error there. That means your kind of intuitive or self-assessment is very close to the outcome from our system, including all the questions that can assess the technological competency. So at the beginning of the survey questionnaire, we ask these kind of things. And we can perform some analysis based on the outcome from this question. And same goes to the risk perception by asking risk attitude, like a risk avoider, right? Or risk seeker, something like that. And we also ask if they really have any experience in the specific disruptive technology. we could expect this kind of outcome. If you see no side, there are so many no's, right? So still, we need to do more study or more discussion how we are going to treat the ones who said no for the specific technology. But what I can tell you is we are not going to focus on each of the specific technology. Rather, we are going to focus on the ones who have experience in at least one specific technology, something like that. But if the industry can be improved in sense of the new technology adoption later, then probably the future study can focus more on a specific technology by specific technology. Changes in knowledge required. This means we kind of ask them rate the relative importance of this knowledge area for conventional project versus project with at least one disruptive technology. And our hypothesis or assumption is like when they manage the project with disruptive technology, there must be the specific knowledge area that should take higher priority, that should take higher importance, right? So we haven't conducted the statistical task to compare the importance. But if you see the values, mean and median of values and scores, I don't see much of the difference there. So even if we conduct the statistical analysis, probably not much difference. So what does it mean? What does it imply? It's up to you in sense of the interpretation. But from my own interpretation, I think all of these knowledge areas cannot be ignored even in conventional project, as well as the project with disruptive technology. Right? Now, I try to justify myself, I know. But now we try to play with these outcomes, and we are going to play more with the data set we get. Okay, so what about skill sets? When we compare the relative importance of the skill set we identify between the conventional and the project with disruptive technology. And as I said, we identified the 37 technological risk perception factors, and you can see about 10 to 12 here. But eventually, we have all the data for the 37 factors. So going through this kind of 37 factors, each respondent will provide their input, right? And based on these inputs, these guys or these girls' risk level, technological risk perception level will be assessed. And that will be embedded to that system we are going to develop. So now, let's say Olivia access to the tool, then the answer for those questions, then Olivia will get to know her own level of the technological risk perception. And same goes to the technological competency, but far more factors here. Right? If we have some more time and some more budget to spend, probably we may revisit the set of the factors for TRP as well, in order to see if we missed any important factors. Because when we compare TC versus TLP, the number of the factors are relatively small. I'm not saying that the better all the way, no. But we may need to revisit to see if the set is quite comprehensive or not. This is the just conceptual architecture of the system itself. So as I said, the user just access to the website, right? We just developed the user interface or the front end wireframe so far. Then this user will go through all the questions. And as I said, there will be the pre-programmed algorithm calculating all the kind of inputs to come up with the index and score And based on the index and the score, this user will get the kind of suggestions and recommendation to reduce his or her own technological risk perception gap, and as well as to improve technological competency based on the outcome from these systems. Okay. Some wireframes, they are going to register for this system. Then, as I said, they're going to go through all kind of the questions we set there. And we haven't spent much time of the design for the outcome output, but we can show the later diagram in sense of the sub areas of competency or sub areas of technological risk perception. Then they can easily see the weak points or weakness. Then based on this, we can provide the suggestions and recommendations. Okay. As I said, this project started at the peak point of COVID-19, so we couldn't make much progress at the beginning. But now we completed most of the tasks kind of promised for this IPUR project. And the last month, February this year, we submitted the proposal white paper to the university, and university is now reviewing the white paper, and hopefully we can get the green light to submit to MOE. And regarding the journal paper and the acknowledgement, we submitted the 2 journal papers based on this research project funded by IPUR, and we included the acknowledgement. And we have been developing 2 more journal papers, and probably we can submit these 2 end of this year, by end of this year, something like that. Okay. So in sense of the progress, I don't see any issue, and this is all about content for this research project. Thank you. I took too much time.
Thank you, Prof. Huang. That was very interesting, very exciting to hear. I think personally, I previously had some recruitment background, so I think these kind of tools actually might be very interesting for big corporations like CapitaLand if they're thinking about assessing technological competencies of potential incoming candidates.
Sure. Yeah. Once the system is complete, actually, I think it takes some more time, right, Jasmine?
Maybe we have some time for question and answers. Could I perhaps just start with a question? Because you mentioned that, looking at the model here, you mentioned that this could be potentially applied to other industries as well. Which are the immediate industries you would think this could be applied to easily?
Even though I said it can be applied to other industry, probably we can think more, or first for other kind of jobs within the built environment. Now we talk about just project managers, but I have another PhD students who is working on this in the context of facility management. Yeah. The industry, because what I can tell you is all industries have project managers. Am I right? Like oil and gas industry, manufacturing industry, and food industry, and they have their own managers. And probably they want to assess the competency or risk perception, technological risk perception of those employees as well. So the first industry we may reach to would be the one who has been changing very fast in sense of the adoption of new technology. So IT industry and like a bank and finance industry as well. Especially, they really need to have upgraded security system, right? And much more digitalization there, right? And actually, I think the construction and built environment industry is the last one who really think about this. Yep. Jasmine, anything to add?
No, I think you covered most everything. Yeah.
Don't be shy. You are the expert. Okay.
I'd love to ask a couple questions if
Yes, please.
nobody else wants to jump in. One, just like to understand how you're looking at TRP in the context of high and low. So when we're trying to think about risk perceptions, we're often thinking about not as well as high and low, we're thinking about, is there a gap between the objective risk and the risk perception? So, and that gap could be either way. It could be an underestimate or an overestimate. So from the point of view of this research, is there a sort of underlying assumption that there's an overestimation of risks related to technology, or is there scope also to look at underestimation of risks in some conditions? And does it make so that was one thing. The other thing was about the you spoke about the self-assessment and then the assessment that you're going to develop from the other questions that you've got in the survey, and talking about sort of hoping that these two would deliver very similar results. And so the self-assessment would offer a kind of validation of your model. Did I get that right? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah.
Is that roughly what you have in mind?
Yeah.
So there are also lots of reasons to think that people would be bad at assessing their own competency and risk perception. And so I wonder whether, if you do get a gap between the two, you could interpret it differently as telling you something about the way people see themselves. And you could think of another way to come up with a validation for the results of your model, which I think will be, I think would be something useful. And I think it would be a shame if the model results, if the self-assessment kind of cast doubt on your model results, which could be very good, and it could be people themselves who are bad at judging their own competence, for example.
Yeah. Thank very much for your point and questions, which are very valid and helpful to think about kind of near-term plans. Okay, so in sense of, we had the same question as Olivia when we talk about TRP. Which one is good, higher better or lower better or something like that? So that's why I didn't really detail that part. But we are going to kind of have the group focus group meeting, which include the experts of those technology, like cyber physical system, AR, VR, and something like that. And let's say if we can set kind of actual risk level here, because x-axis represent the TRP level, right? But let's assume that this is the right actual level of the risk perception for specific technology, or consolidated level of risk perception for different types of technology, something like that. And there is one who has this level of the risk perception actually here, right? And this is kind of, how can I say it? Over perception, right?
Yeah,
think like a too much, it's a perceived too much risk, right? So I don't think this level is correct and right to have a right level of the technological competency, or to make the better outcome for the project itself. So eventually, this guy's perception should be realigned to this actual level of the perception. And let's say Nathaniel's risk perception here, right? That means this guy is risk taker and see too low level of the risk for the project, right? Then this guy should have higher level of the risk perception to meet the reality of the project or the situation he or she is facing, right? Challenging part is here, actually, how we are going to set this kind of actual risk level for different types of technology. Right, Jasmine? Yeah. So that's why in order, fortunately, this is not the scope of IPR at this project. though the full proposal actually include this part. But challenging part is to first identify the right person for that specific technology, and even how we are going to set this expert risk perception level as the norm of the risk perception for that specific technology. Okay.
I mean, one possibility would be to look at the difference in risk perceptions between people who are more familiar with the technology and less familiar. And if there's a big gap, then that would allow you to say that overall people who are less expert tend to underestimate, and that would suggest that you should shift your objective estimate of the risk, whatever, to the right, and vice versa. So at least you could distinguish between people, people who know something about it, people who know a lot about it, and people who know nothing about it.
And I don't exactly remember the second question, but what I capture is like, okay, with this kind of level of different risk perception, we don't really know yet how this different level of the risk perception affect TC, technological competency, or the vice versa.
So the other question was about the self-assessment of your own risk perceptions, and then your index based on the survey data that you're going to develop, or the model you're going to develop.
Yeah, correct. Our initial plan, as I presented, right, there is one specific question, both actually self-assessment, right? But with only one question versus with many questions, then we will see the error between these two scores. But yes, I think Olivia made a good point. There should be, I think, other than just self-assessment, to validate the model and to confirm the kind of consolidated index or something like that. So any suggestion for that?
One thing you could do is to get people to evaluate each other.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly how people would know each other, or you could have a vignette of a person and a person who you characterize as having a certain amount of experience, a certain amount of knowledge, etc., etc. And then you ask how that person would, I need to think it through some more, but you ask in the survey how you think that person would perceive the risk, or something along those lines. Or would you consider that person to be objective or risk averse or risk loving? You could think about it some more.
Yeah.
Rather than assessing yourself, you ask them to assess somebody else based on a vignette or a profile.
Sure. Yeah, actually, one of our goal will be provide a benchmark. And even like quartiles, but it's too cruel to kind of individuals under the organization. I understand the limitations. Right? When we talk about benchmarking, it is kind of a very serious issue, and sometimes a problem as well, because the employers usually use the outcome from this kind of assessment to penalize their employees rather than to improve and encourage them to improve, right? So that's why there should be the mindset change and culture change, and there are so many things which I cannot handle all. Yeah. And thank you very much, Olivia. Yeah.
Are there any further questions? Okay, I think if there's no other further questions, I'd like to ask everyone to put their hands together and thank Professor Huang and Jasmine for making this presentation. It's been very interesting. And then I think we'll touch base with you again, Prof. Huang, separately.
Sure.
Further down the road, when your project is a bit more ready, and hopefully we get to hear the good news about the white paper submission to NUS.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye.